Before the end of last year, James Gunn said that he'd have announcements related to the new DCU, the DC Cinematic Universe, would be coming out early in the year, specifically in the month of January. And we waited. I waited. I kept keeping a weekend slot parked for him, and he didn't do anything, and I had to slot something else in every time. Last day of the year, and it's not even a press release. He just puts out a video of him rambling at a camera. That deadline snuck up on you, didn't it, James? Okay, so yeah, first thing is, normally there would have been a Doctor Who video here. It would have been the Take-Two review for Ascension of the Cybermen. That's getting bumped a week, and the reason for that is I wanted to jump on this as quickly as I could, and also I need to talk about Doctor Who spinoffs because Russell T. Davies has confirmed that those are being worked on. So that'll be Saturday's video, and I wasn't prepared to make that be a week after Saturday and slot this into Saturday because then this would have been late and that would have been crazy late. So here we are. But yes, James Gunn has finally given us some degree of guidance of what the heck the plan is for DC projects going forward. And not just films, also television, which is worth noting because while the two had been kept pretty separate through this time, with honestly there being a fair bit more success in the TV area than in the movies, or at least consistent success in the TV area, now the intention is to have it, well, to have it be more like the MCU, where everything is definitively connected and potentially cross over with each other. So there were a few things that went on in this. And you're going to get my thoughts on all the various sort of moving parts and sort of also probably read into some of the bits where he was a little bit more squirrely with what he said, but we'll get there. I do want to sort of just touch on briefly that he had previously acknowledged a couple of things that aren't covered in this video, but there are things that I'm going to bring up. Things like stuff related to the casting. So like, for instance, while we don't have any new cast announcements with this, Gunn himself has said that they are looking, well, specifically for a younger actor to play Superman, which, boy, the timing of that wasn't great because Henry Cavill had just had his kind of return as a post-credit scene, I believe, in Black Adam. I still haven't found the time to watch Black Adam. So there was that, and it was all gearing up like he's back, and then, well, no, he isn't, because James Gunn wanted to go with a younger Superman. And actually, word from Dave Bautista is that they're looking for younger people, 30s and down, pretty much across the board. That got brought up because somebody asked Dave Bautista about him playing Bane, because he kind of campaigned to be able to play Bane. And I guess he actually did talk with James Gunn about it. And James Gunn basically said, like, we're going younger. We're casting in the range of people that we can expect to be able to still be doing these parts 10 years from now. And Dave Bautista, as great as he is, he's in his 50s. So, and he didn't seem to hold any hard feelings about that. He seemed excited to see what'll happen, but it was just him acknowledging the reality of the situation. So there was stuff like that. We had the recent announcement of the canceling of Doom Patrol and of Titans, neither of which Gunn is responsible for. Those were decisions that were made before he came on board. That was something that he had to clarify because obviously the announcement of cancellation came after he was in charge. And people forget that just because you're the one who's come in doesn't mean that everything that happens from here on was what you wanted to happen. There's lingering stuff from the past people who were in charge. And that was also the first stuff that he brought up, because starting, he talked about the 4 upcoming films that were basically created for the old version of DC films that are still going to come out. Actually, hold that thought. He did talk about those, but even before that, he did say that he really wants to get everything universally branded under one unified DCU.
our jobs, mine and Peter's, is to come in and make sure the DCU is connected in film, television, gaming, and animation. That the characters are consistent, played by the same actors, and it works within one story.
And there will still be some other stuff, but he wants it very clearly branded as Elseworlds. So that's things that he very specifically cites, specifically Todd Phillips' upcoming Joker sequel and any other follow-ups from that, and Matt Reeves's The Batman sequel, and also presumably the Penguin show that is going to tie into that, are going to be very distinctly Elseworlds. And we may even see unique branding to go with that. But he is not talking about the status of any of that because that's not what he, had to announce. I don't think he's even really involved in those. It seems to be just a case of him stepping back, like, let these things happen. They're successful. Let them happen. That's not what I was brought in to try and unify. And unify is the big word. This is very much trying to be the MCU, which, I mean, I get the DC movies have always wanted to be the MCU, but also makes me nervous because it's easy to forget because of how badly it went off the rails. The old DC plan under Snyder also had a 5 to 10 year plan and announced a lot of stuff that was coming out. Now, Gunn does something slightly smarter, which is that he does not give release dates, even years of release dates on any of the things past the stuff that's already been filmed that, again, predates him. Whereas the old DC plan actually had a whole bunch of dates on it, and boy, that didn't happen. So while at the very least he is announcing a lot of stuff, he's not overpromising on a timeline, which is good. But I still can't help but be nervous even with him in charge, because to me it seems very clear that something that's going this big, this quick, and this expansive, yeah, he might be under creative control, but that feels like a top-level executive mandate. Because yes, he and Peter Safran might be the co-CEOs of that division of Warner Brothers Discovery, but they still answer to people like David Zaslav. Even amongst mega corporation CEOs, I have almost no respect for David Zaslav at all. But just seeing how big and expansive this is already makes me nervous. If it's going to happen, I would prefer someone like Gunn be at the head of it, but I kind of would prefer that they get their feet under themselves with a couple of really solid core stuff before they start launching into a whole bunch of simultaneous stuff that's all supposed to just come together. This is the problem with planning too much at the front end. It assumes that not only does your first step succeed, but your first, second, third, and fourth steps also succeed because you've already started work on steps 5 and 6. So if they don't succeed, boy, is that a massive ripple effect. And that's already what happened with the previous DC stuff. Okay, but I need to get off that topic. Let's talk about what he actually had to say. So, as I said, he started talking about the 4 movies coming out that are not really part of his new initiative. There's the upcoming Shazam, which some people might even read it as he's implying there'll be more Shazam after this. He didn't really. What he said was, Shazam was always kind of its own thing off to the side, which basically feels like he's kind of going yeah, it gets to be here because it doesn't really interfere or do anything with the stuff we're planning forward, which maybe that's leaving the window open to do more stuff with the property since it's not overly tied into the old continuity that they're not really going to be using anymore. So maybe not. We'll see. Next one that he brought up was The Flash. Now, what's interesting about The Flash is he does say that it's a reset for the universe. The funny thing is that it must have always been a reset because that movie well predates his involvement. So we have not heard about any serious reshoots on that, partially because of all the stuff going on with Ezra Miller, probably would have made reshoots impractical. And I am not getting into all that again. I do not want to talk about them for as long as I can possibly get away with. But it is interesting that he highlighted the fact that it's a reset. Now, whether that's to his benefit or detriment kind of depends on whether the way the movie ends is by just making it clear, and now the universe has changed, and then it ends, leaving it open-ended for what the new universe is, because that he could just directly springboard off of. But if it gives a very clear indication towards the end of what the new universe will be, whatever that is probably not going to be the case. So I am going to be curious to see how that pans out and how much new, well, not reshoots, but how much editing, reworking has been done to make it more the former, where maybe initially it might have been the latter. I don't know. We'll see. He talks up Blue Beetle a little bit, just sort of saying how, it's a cool story and it's a fun character, and doesn't really say too much more about it. I mean, that makes sense. That's a movie that hasn't even really had its promotional cycle begin yet. And then he glosses over Aquaman 2 so fast, because that's actually kind of the one I have the most questions about right now. Because if Blue Beetle is anything like Shazam, then it's going to be fairly detached from the overall continuity and can just exist as a standalone thing before he gets his thing started. And Flash, as I said, might even feed directly into it. Aquaman is, of the 4 remaining to come out, Aquaman is definitively a product of a dead continuity. And he just glosses on past that. If I were to guess, I suspect that it probably is going to be treated as a final hurrah for those characters, and that it was probably a condition of Gunn taking over that he would not have to keep carrying that on, even though the Aquaman film, the first one, definitely, probably the second one, will also be very successful. And actually, I suppose that's worth talking about real quick. There are certainly some fans out there, fans of the Snyderverse, who aren't happy with how much has just been swept away. Cavill being a big thing, and also just there's no indication that Gunn intends to pick up any of the possible thing that he could have. The films that were already finished are being allowed to come out, unlike what happened to Batgirl. Again, thank you, David Zaslav. But, other than that, he's not holding to that old continuity at all. And while I appreciate the frustration and disappointment that the fans of the Snyderverse probably have for that, especially around Cavill, because they were just getting excited that he was coming back and then it didn't happen. Like, that just sucks. I get that. But I don't blame him at all for going clean slate on this, which every indication to me says that's what this is. Because this is where I'm hashtag not all Snyder fans, but this is where the Snyderverse movement, let's go with that, not the fans, but the movement, restore the Snyder Cut and then later restore the Snyderverse. This is where they kind of made a rod for their own back, which is that they have, there was all the push for the Snyder Cut, and then they got the Snyder Cut, and then they said restore the Snyderverse. They kind of made it clear that they weren't going to be happy with just one thing. And it's just going to put James Gunn in a better position to wipe all of it away. And yes, people will complain about that. And again, not unjustly, if you lost something that you cared about, I get that. But, those people were never going to be happy with anything he did. And if he kept anything around, it wouldn't have been interpreted as throwing them a bone. They established they were just going to keep demanding that it keep going. They were going to harass him to maintain Zack Snyder's continuity or his ideas or something, and the guy's not going to do that. So I think a clean break was probably the least painful option, both for him and for fans, which, again, I get that, especially the Cavill thing, that hurt for some folks. I don't doubt it. But anyway, that's me touching on that. And we have now covered the lingering films from the Snyderverse. What is coming up new? So Gunn calls this whole thing Chapter 1. Well, I say this whole thing. He says everything that he talks about is under the umbrella of Chapter 1, but what he talks about is not everything that will be part of that. Presumably, this is meant to be an equivalent of the Marvel Phase 1, but he doesn't say that, but it's hard to interpret anything else. The thing is, though, that brings me back to my earlier point. He then goes on to list 10 projects. I forget how many. It's a lot. He lists a lot of projects. MCU Phase 1 was 4 movies and a team up. It was 4, no, it was 5. 5 movies and a team up. They didn't try to integrate the TV stuff until later. They didn't even really have the TV stuff until later, and they didn't really have any crossover until we got to the team up. So again, you're begging the comparison, and it makes me nervous. Anyways, what are we actually looking at here? So he calls the chapter Gods and Monsters, which initially made me go, because there is a Gods and Monsters animated movie, which is very good, but also is not something that should be used as a basis for what this is. It seems to be a fairly arbitrary, well, not arbitrary, but like the ties to that don't seem to be relevant. It's more about, here we are introducing all these new godlike characters and all these new monsters. That seems to kind of be what he's talking about. The very first thing that he mentions then from there is actually really interesting, and it's ambitious. We'll see if it's biting off more than he can chew. He talks about something that he calls the Creature Commandos, which is going to be an animated series that is in continuity, and he is intending to cast voice talent who could also feasibly play these characters in live action. Now it's daring, I'll give him that. It's the kind of thing that certainly sounds good. I just wonder if the logistics are gonna just not be worth it. Because Marvel has had various incarnations of animated shows as the MCU has been running, including some that very much spin directly off from the film stuff, but they're not in continuity. Like there was a Guardians of the Galaxy show that is not canon. It's not meant to be in continuity, but it came out after the movie and is building off of those versions of the characters very clearly. But here, Gunn is and that's his kickoff. Well, again, we don't know if that's the first thing that's happening or just the first thing he wanted to talk about. Again, he didn't give a timeline on any of this, sneaky little bugger that he is. After that, he brings up Waller. So this is Amanda Waller, and he does mention Viola Davis. So she is going to come back. Now, on the one hand, that might seem slightly surprising because she was cast under the Snyder regime. On the other hand, he's already made use of her, not only in his own Suicide Squad movie, but also in the Peacemaker TV show. So he's made it clear that whether this new universe is intended to be in continuity with the old one or not, and it isn't, he still intends to make use of her in that part. Now, he doesn't specifically label whether this is a show or a movie, but he does cite the people heading it up, which are the some of the creators behind HBO's Watchmen and also Doom Patrol, since that's now wrapped up. And since both of those people come from a TV background, I am presuming that this is a TV project. And there was a mention that it will include some Peacemaker characters, though again, they are not currently identified. And honestly, this one makes a lot of sense. I mean, first of all, the behind the scenes talent that he said they've secured is, I'm yes, here for that. But also just continuing to move forward with something connected to Peacemaker that is also going to be a show, which again, he doesn't confirm, but I can't imagine it would be a movie with those creators involved. So that makes a lot of sense. And you have a lot of potential through Waller to introduce all kinds of characters. You can initially have her connected with some of the Peacemaker characters who are still around, but you know, the very nature of what she does allows you to introduce dozens of characters to use later or just burn off, however you feel like doing it. And then there is what will most likely be the first release. Gunn himself calls this the true start of the DCU. And that will be what is currently being titled Superman Legacy. We know a little bit about this, not from this video update itself, but it has been confirmed this is going to deal with a younger Superman. I can't recall if it's been confirmed as an origin story or if it's just being speculated as one since they dropped Cavill to go younger. But regardless, it is going to deal with a younger Superman, and he is intending this to be kind of the backbone of this relaunch, which makes sense given that A, Superman is the premier hero of any DC continuity, and he also kicked off the last attempt at this, which is still in memory. So again, part of me wonders if it might not have been better to go with somebody else, somebody other than Superman, maybe even somebody other than Superman or Batman as your big kickoff. But these are the big power names. So it makes, well, from a marketing perspective, it certainly makes sense. From a, let's really give this a fresh coat of paint, maybe somebody else would have been better, but this is the world we've got. He is writing this one and I believe directing it himself. So that gives me more interest in it than I might have otherwise had in terms of just saying, here's a new Superman story. Because, like, Superman's fine. I just, haven't loved most of the movies that have featured him. And that's not even just a DCU thing. Next up, he mentions a TV show project called Lanterns. Now, this is kind of, he kind of compares it, I think, to True Detective. This is meant to be kind of a procedural with Green Lanterns, and that there will be multiple Green Lanterns in it. So that is, that's certainly a way to do it. He does say it's going to be terrestrial largely, which it would have to be, because Green Lantern, depending on how spacey you get with it, can get very expensive very fast. And if it's going to be a TV show, they probably need to control the budget a bit and keep it more grounded on Earth. It will be tricky to still elevate it so that it doesn't feel like another one of the CW shows, Flash, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, all that. Not that I'm knocking those shows. I like Legends of Tomorrow. But those looked very much like TV projects, which they were. And if this is all meant to be in continuity, there's probably going to be a little bit more of a vested interest to have it all look cinema ready. And granted, something like Peacemaker did, but Peacemaker was also a pretty small scale story at the end of the day. So it's going to be interesting to take characters often known for going off into space to the very center of the universe and try and tell a smaller scale story with it. It'll be interesting to see how that balances. The next one he mentions, and he does say it's going to be a movie, is The Authority. And this... okay, this makes me nervous. So The Authority... All right, there's a couple of things about The Authority. A few reasons this makes me nervous. First is The Authority in the comics can be very good, but the quality of that book has varied wildly depending on who writes it. Warren Ellis created it initially and had a pretty strong run. Then Mark Millar took over, and it was not good. It was not good at all. And so even beyond having mixed feelings about the source material, even knowing that there is some good stuff there, the purpose of The Authority is to deconstruct, superheroes as a whole. Their whole thing is that they are what people like Lex Luthor are afraid Superman would become. Someone who uses their power to go look, nobody can stop us. We're going to run things the way we think they should be run because nobody can stop us from doing it. And when you do that well, it can be a really interesting examination on the corrupting nature of power and, doing the wrong thing for the right reasons or doing the right thing for the wrong reasons or any number of things. There's plenty to dig into with that. But in a world where we're already dealing with series like The Boys and Invincible and even the Watchmen series from a couple years ago, this potentially feels redundant. Granted, he's saying this is going to be a movie. Those were all shows. Maybe the shift to medium will help it. But then the other thing is they're going to have to thread this needle really carefully to have it not come off like a dig at the Snyderverse and kicking them while they're down. Because that kind of, at least touching on, not necessarily deconstructing or criticizing, but definitely touching on the notion of godlike beings that can't be stopped by normal people was part of Snyder's approach to characters, especially like Superman. Now, granted, Superman's not in the Authority, but like the ideas that they're presenting, that the Authority normally presents as a, oh, what if this happened? Like, we're kind of just a little bit what was already happening, or at least already being explored in what had been the main DC thing. And again, I know that's not the continuity anymore, but like, if you do it wrong, it could really feel like you are kicking the Snyder fans while they're down and making fun of what Snyder was not allowed to keep doing. Just given the nature of what stories the Authority tend to be used to tell. I don't know, like, it could work. Obviously, it could. I know nothing else. I know nothing about how they're exactly approaching it, but like, thread that needle carefully, man. After that, he brings up another TV project called Paradise Lost, which will focus on Themyscira, the home of the Amazons. It is interesting that while he mentions Wonder Woman, it is only to use her to clarify that it's where she comes from. There is no indication that Wonder Woman would feature in this project, and I would say most likely we probably won't see Gal Gadot back as Wonder Woman again, though I don't think that's been officially confirmed one way or the other. But regardless, this is presumably set to tell more stories, on that island, the mythical sort of end of things, which, yeah, as long as you don't like do too many episodes in a season, you keep it to like 8 to 10. Yeah, there's stuff to be told there. Get us to know the world, do some more world building there. How much of the mythological aspects are actually real? How much of it is just mythology? And give us that sense. Like you can basically have a ancient Greek mythology style adventure show. This could be the new successor to Xena Warrior Princess if they do it right. We'll see. Again, we don't know too much, but like, oh, okay. I suppose the other option is it could end up like that Krypton show, which did get made, didn't it? That did actually happen. I didn't imagine that, right? That did actually, I think it did. I can't remember. Does anybody remember? Did I just slip into the Berenstain universe? I'm supposed to be in the Berenstain one. All right, anyways. Then there's Brave and the Bold, which is an interesting title to use to introduce your Batman. Again, separate from the Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson Batman projects. So Brave and the Bold right now is still pretty well associated with a not so long ago very silly and campy animated take, which I'm going to presume this won't be, but that title choice is interesting, and it will be interesting to see if that's going to be at least a partial indicator of a lighter tone than at least the Reeves stuff, which would make sense if only to avoid sort of brand confusion. Other than just having a different actor play Batman, have it be tonally very distinct from the Matt Reeves would probably be in their best interest to do. He says that he's going to be basing this largely on Grant Morrison's run on Batman, which means it's gonna be Damian Wayne as Robin. That is specifically cited. So I'm very mixed on this. On the one hand, we have gone so long without Robin. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, how long it's been since Robin has been in a movie, other than like vaguely referenced as being dead already. I know Batman and Robin was a bad movie, but that was not Robin's fault as a concept. Robin's a very core part of who Batman is. So I appreciate that we're getting a Robin again. I just hate Damian. I hate him. He's such a little turd. I hate him so much. Now, to be fair, most of my experience with him is in the animated films where that character appeared. So part of my dislike might be that those scripts were particularly bad, because most of them were, and that the voice actor was particularly insufferable, because, yeah, he was. Maybe he's better on the page, but also it does make me worry, because if it's Damian, then he can't be the first Robin. Damian doesn't work as the first Robin. This has to be taking somebody who is a trained assassin, someone trained to kill, and trying to slot him into an established role of someone who very much does not do that. That's part of the point. But you can't have him be the first Robin. And James Gunn does mention sort of kicking off the Bat family, but he doesn't mention anybody else. So I am going to assume right now that we are going to get at least an indication, if not the presence of, characters like Nightwing, or possibly Tim Drake having been around. I don't really need Jason Todd, but again, I'm just not a big fan of him either before or after he died. He was most interesting when he was dead. I'm sorry, he was. But in any case, I'm curious about this Batman project, but a little nervous. Next up, Booster Gold as a TV series. That's an easy win. Booster Gold is a somewhat comedic character, and that's going to lend itself to an ongoing TV show quite well. Could actually very easily, not necessarily tonally, but in terms of general feel, it could very much just slot in as a replacement for Doom Patrol. So yeah, that if you're going to do Booster Gold, I think doing him as a TV show makes a lot of sense. Next up, he cites another movie, this one called Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And he says it's got to be based off a Tom King run on Supergirl. Now, I have not read Tom King's run on Supergirl. What I am familiar with when it comes to Tom King's work, I'm not impressed. He must have done some stuff well. I'm not familiar with it. He did some real questionable stuff, both with Batman and with the DC Comics in general. If you've ever heard of Heroes in Crisis, well, don't mention that phrase to a hardcore DC Comics fan, because they will either break down sobbing or they will try to hurt you for reminding them that happened. So maybe this was a good run of Tom King stuff, though. I don't know. I honestly don't. But putting an emphasis on Supergirl and also giving her a movie, again, presumably after Superman's, could give a really interesting contrast of the different ways and methodology of being heroes, and not just between people with completely different power sets or people who don't even have powers, like contrasting Batman with Superman, but actually contrasting two people with a similar ideological outlook and the same power set, but also doing something different. There's potential there. You do it wrong, it just becomes redundant, and it's why do we need girl Superman? We already have Superman. So I would hope Gunn would know enough to know that it's got to be something different from that, so it doesn't feel that way. But again, we'll see. And again, that was confirmed for a movie. Last thing he mentions is Swamp Thing, which of course did have a series. It only got one season, so that was canceled ages ago. And he does not clarify whether this one's a movie or a show. I do imagine, though, the folks over at DC probably kicking themselves a bit when they saw that Man-Thing showed up in the Werewolf by Night special that Marvel did over on Disney+. But he does mention Swamp Thing being a more, very different tonally, and being more horror-driven, which Swamp Thing should be, to be completely honest. And that is another thing that I'm it sort of lends the notion of things this is ambitious, hopefully not too ambitious, because it's an ambitious thing to go tonally dark and have it be in continuity with stuff that is presumably meant to be lighter than the last guy's stuff. But on its own, I'm okay, sure. But that with the potential ambition of trying to have a Batman that is entertaining yet distinct enough from the ongoing Matt Reeves stuff to also have an animated show that is going to be in continuity, possibly with the same actors voicing as may appear in other stuff. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of ambition in these plans, and this isn't the complete plan. That's the other thing. And this is supposedly chapter 1. If I take any individual project on its own, I can go, yeah, I could see that working. Hearing about all of them at once at the same time when we don't really know how this is all going to go down, the closest we have to a kickoff for this is, I guess, Gunn's own Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, which may not be super indicative, given that those are intended to be R-rated, and a lot of the projects that I mentioned probably aren't. Each individual thing, I'm like, cool, potential. Hearing about them all at once just makes me nervous. I'm nervous just because, and I know he's not personally writing and directing all this stuff. I know that, but he is writing and directing some of it at the same time that he's trying to orchestrate all of this. And that is something that makes me a little nervous. Like, I appreciate James Gunn. He's an incredibly talented guy. But Kevin Feige over at Marvel doesn't also direct. I mean, granted, I'm not sure he could, and I don't think he has ambitions to, but like, I think if he even wanted to try, it would be a bad idea. You got enough on your plate. And I'm a little bit nervous that this is going to be possibly the folly that he's just taking on too much. If nothing else, even if it's good, I'm worried about him burning out. But hopefully he knows his work capacity and what he can manage better than I do. There's a lot to get excited for. And obviously, right now it's very abstract. Right now it's all ideas. Until we get things like casting, costume reveals, first trailers, find out more about, especially with some of the movie projects, who's directing, who's writing them, because we don't know a lot of this for a lot of it. There's only a handful of these that we know the talent attached. And the times where we do know, it's like, oh, okay, like James Gunn working on the Superman project, some of the creators behind Doom Patrol and some of the ones behind Watchmen working on the Waller thing. Like, okay, so like where I'm hearing the talent, I'm hearing good talent. I'll relax a little bit when we get more names attached, I think is where I'm at right now. Because right now, this is a very ambitious plan that with the right people could work. But boy, that is a tricky and pretty narrow path you're trying to walk. And it's going to be very easy to fall off it. But we'll see. I'm going to remain as hopeful as I can, given the nature of my brain to sort of see. I can't stop my brain from picking apart the ways in which something might go wrong. It's just a thing that I do. I literally can't stop myself from doing it. I've tried. I can't. But even taking that into account, yeah, there's some reasons to have early hope. Like, don't go crazy yet. I don't think we have enough information to get properly hyped, but yeah, I want to hear more. And maybe have a more intricate presentation than oh crap, it's the last day of the month and I told them I'd give them something. Quick, sit me down in front of a camera kind of presentation. Next time, maybe. Whatever. So all these plans for DC movies, TV, etc. What do you think about them? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't do that, the like, share, subscribe, help me out. But don't worry too much about it. Because what I want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meeting. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Well, it's Patreon supporter shout-out time, folks. So thank you to Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Angus Bjarnason, Linda Walters, Emu Delkey, Theotha Boyd, Toy Lowly, Becky Spark, Fernabilax the Poodle, Zach, Tracy Scrabbit, General Contact Unit Problem Child, Angry Gasperl, Tim Price, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Thanks so much for your help. You can get your name read out too. Check out the rewards in the Patreon. Is that what they should do? Should they check the Patreon?